very pleasure for me to welcome such a large gathering of people to a meeting of Child and Family Services. So welcome to all the members of the committee, all the officers who will be presenting to us, and cabinet members as well. Cabinet members, sorry, I should say, I must add. And also we have some visitors as well, which we're very fortunate to have. Basically, we got a visitor from Adult Social Services who's listening with us today. Oh, no, you're not. Sorry, I apologise. I'm going on the bend. But we certainly got visitors from the Education Scrutiny Performance Panel, Chairman, and I don't know if Beth is here, is she? Ms. Allender?
Yep, okay. I'm here.
Okay, fine. So, and also we have Councillor Mary Jones, who I'm sure will want to ask us a few questions about CAMS before we finish. So, welcome to you all, and we'll get this meeting now underway. Item 1 is apologies for absence, please.
We've received apologies from Councillor Mike Day, Chair.
Okay, anybody got any disclosures of interest that they want to make at this point in time? Nope. So item C is prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips. Before we go on to the meeting properly in terms of the matters, minutes and the matters arising, etc., I'm just going to take this opportunity for people around the room to introduce themselves so that everybody who's online will know who they are. And I'll start with you, if I may, Liz.
Liz Jordan, Scrutiny Officer. Cheryl Roberts, Scrutiny Officer.
Councillor Robert Smith, Cabinet Member for Education and Skills.
Councillor Louise Gibbard, Cabinet Member for Care Services.
Hi, my name's Helen Howells and I'm the Team Manager for Learner Engagement from the Education Directorate.
Julie
Oops, sorry. Becky Benny, Education Coordinator for Children Looked After.
Julie Davies, Head of Child and Family Services.
Helen Williams, Principal Officer for Young People and Adolescent Services in Child and Family.
Dave Hales, Director of Social Services.
Helen Smith, Head of Nursing for Mental Health Services, Swansea Bay.
Hi, Dee Richards, Lead Nurse, Swansea Bay CAMS.
Yeah, Lyndon Jones, Councillor and Chair of the Education Scrutiny Committee.
Sandra Joy, Councillor for Uplands and Brynmill Ward.
Susan Jones, Councillor for Gowerton and Chair of Adult Services.
Councillor Wendy Lewis for Wynarloth Ward.
Thank you. And there are some faces appearing on the screen as well. Perhaps you would like to go around and introduce yourselves as well. I've got
Councillor Kevin Griffiths, Pontolis Ward.
Pardon?
Councillor Kevin Griffiths, Pontolis Ward.
Anybody else pop in now quickly?
Yvonne
Mary? Mary?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Mary Jones, Dunbar and Clay Ward, and I was the original chair of the CAMS scrutiny quite a while ago before it's been referred to this panel.
Mark?
Afternoon all. Thank you, Chair. Mark Chide, Ward Councillor for Llangefeli.
Amy?
Hi, Amy Barrett, Team Leader for the 16+ team in Swansea.
Yvonne?
Thanks, Chair. Yvonne Jardine, Councillor for Morriston Ward, or one of the councillors.
Okay, Victoria?
Hi, Victoria Holland, and I'm the Councillor for Pontlw and Tircraig.
And last but not least, by any means at all, Beth?
Hi, so I'm the co-opted member for primary schools in the Education Scrutiny. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, item 4 on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting. I'll say to the members that you will have had the opportunity to have a good look through those. I don't know if anybody's got any points they want to raise in terms of accuracy. I can't see anything, so could I have somebody prove a minute? Sue, seconder. Wendy, thank you very much. I don't think there's anything matters arising from my point of view, unless anybody wants to raise anything. That moves us on then to item 5, which is letters to the Cabinet member. Quite a comprehensive one the last time and a response. Anybody got any questions in terms of those letters? If not, I'm certainly just got one, if I may, Louise. And that's to say thank you for your response letter, basically, but I'm still not sure how we measure individual lacks educational improvement and progress.
Perhaps education colleagues can pick on upon that as, I don't know, now or part of your presentation, or would you, are you able to, to give us a bit of insight?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Chair. Apologies. Obviously, I hadn't prepared a response, and I wasn't sure whether you were happy with the response that we did prepare for Councillor Gibbard. So I'm not really sure what more I can add at this stage, other than to say that hopefully after the presentation, things might become a little bit easier to understand in terms of the distance we're travelling and the road we're going down in terms of outcomes for looked after learners.
Wait for that and we'll see where we go with it. So that moves us on to item 6, public question time. I don't think we have any. And item 7 is presentation from CAMS, and I know we're fortunate enough to have 2 members from the health board here with us today. I think it's Delia and Erin Smith, so I've got that right anyway. I don't know who wants to take us through the presentation. Who's going to?
I have the presentation, which I'll put onto screen if I can achieve it. Hey, success, bear with me. Sorry, there's always a pregnant pause while I mess up technology. How to get that moved. Fabulous. Okay. Yeah, thank you for having me. This presentations, I think some people may have seen, we did very similar presentation for the Looked After Children's meeting, but still relevant. So hopefully it's kind of what you need. It's just an overview of CAMS and some updates that have happened over the last year and a small look ahead. So I'm sure people know a little bit about CAMS, but Swansea Bay CAMS provides mental health and wellbeing support to children and young people across Neathport Talbot, Swansea and the surrounding rural areas. We have an active caseload of approximately 800 young people at any one time. It's a very seasonal caseload. We have more on the caseload in the winter months. Summer months, the weather improves and caseload reduced because demand for CAMS reduces. That's very much a national and indeed an international picture. Young people seem to do better in the summer months and the school holidays. We have 2 clinic sites. We have the Children's Centre, which is at the Neathport Talbot Hospital, and we have a satellite base, which is Meadow, which is on the Kingsway in Swansea. We also see children and young people in various community locations, including their homes, GP surgeries, schools, all sorts of places where young people are. And CAMS throughout Wales got a new service specification which was issued in mid 2024. We're still working our way through objectives around that. I think it came out pretty much as expected. All CAMS teams have some work to do towards completing it, and we're a reasonable way forward towards that. In terms of how CAMS is organised then, if we think of CAMS as having 3 parts, we have an early intervention type of arm. So School in Reach, which is based on the whole school approach that I'm sure people will be familiar with, offers a input to every school in Swansea and Neath Port Talbot, both primary and secondary schools. This is intended to be for young people's well-being and also for teacher well-being. They put on many activities throughout the year, including individual work with children and young people, small groups for children and young people with specific needs, and whole class teaching. This year, one of the things they rolled out to some schools was some teacher well-being initiatives. They run teacher well-being boards. They offer consultations to schools about individual children, a wealth of different kinds of work they offer. We have liaison posts which are available to liaise with all parts of children's lives. So if you think of the Neath Nest approach and the value of looking at the whole network involved with children and young people's lives, our liaison post holders are very much concerned with that area of work. And I guess if we think early intervention, then to put it somewhere, we have ADHD prescribing service. So CAMS is not responsible currently for the neurodevelopmental pathway for autism and ADHD. So we don't diagnose within CAMS. But once people have had their assessment, we do provide the medical monitoring of ADHD medication. So in terms of the part 1 part of the service, when I say part 1, that's the part 1 of the mental health measure for Wales. So the first experience that people have of that is our single point of access. So all of our referrals come through our single point of access, or SPOA. Every young person gets a triage at the single point of access. So we give a call to them and their family. If they're old enough, we speak to them, and we also speak to family. And we try and build a picture from any record that we have of them, and then decisions are made about the appropriate course of treatment, which may be within CAMS, or it may not be within CAMS. It may be through third sector, statutory sector. We have a number of signposting options, and the SPOA team try and retain familiarity with the 100 or so possible signposting options that are available across the area. We're very much blessed with a really great opportunities from third sector in particular for signposting our young people into all sorts of things that help their well-being and their families' well-being. The majority of people who come into CAMS will have an assessment and then brief intervention. So they have a fully comprehensive assessment by a qualified member of staff. It's what we call a biopsychosocial assessment, so an assessment that isn't just about medical needs, but of course social needs and family needs. We take into account young people's background, how things are with their family and what their social circumstances are like. And then this informs what happens in terms of treatment. Most people will have a low moderate mental health need, so they'll be treated under part 1 of the mental health measure, which allows up to 10 sessions. Most people will have about 6 to 8 sessions. Some people take advantage of our group offerings, so we have a number of groups that are available to young people which are therapeutic in nature. We've found those over the last few years to be very helpful for young people who benefit from each other's mutual support. All of those groups also have a parent element, so parents are very much a part of supporting their young person, and it's very valued by parents. And then if people don't want to do a group, or a group is not suitable, it's very much a choice. People will have individual work for 6 to 8 sessions, usually something that's CBT informed, kind of depends what the need is. The majority of people are then ready for discharge following their 6 to 8 sessions or their group. Some people need a bit more, so they will come under part 2 of the mental health measure. So they'll receive a care and treatment plan and have a care coordinator. The days are very much gone for mental health to work with people for years and years and years. Most young people will have about 8 to 12 months of care coordination before discharge. So not a long in mental health is now that kind of 8 to 12 month period. It gives time for therapeutic input, so many people will have some clinical psychology input or some specific therapy input. People have nursing input, and some people will receive medication. Unlike adults, for young people, medication is rarely used. It's not never, but certainly it's our kind of last port of call, and that's because medication for children and young people in the main has more side effects than it has advantages, and we want young people to really learn how to manage their own mental health and well-being as a priority. But we do have access to medicine for young people, of course. So just to talk a little bit about some aspects, things that have changed over the year to let people know about. So we've been widening access through our single point of access, and in 2024 we introduced secondary schools in Swansea being able to refer direct into CAMHS. That's now rolled out. I think all but 2 secondary schools in Swansea opted into that, and we've been receiving some referrals. The vast majority of referrals still come from GPs, as we would expect, but secondary schools have found it helpful, particularly where families have perhaps not organised themselves to be able to get to the GP, or schools have had specific concerns for young people. And it's great for us because we really value schools' input and their knowledge of the young person concerned. We've been trying to improve triage. It's very much in keeping with our new service specification, and we've invested in some extra staffing to be able to do that, so that all families now get a triage call. We used to just rely on the referral paperwork to make decisions. So we are hopefully making better decisions, and it's well received by parents because we can talk through our signposting options with them. A future possibility that we're looking at through the RPB is to look at a more joined up front door with ourselves, local authority and third sector. I think it's fair to say that project is very much in its infancy and has a way to go. But we're hopeful about the possibility in terms of benefiting families not having to kind of knock on too many doors in keeping with Nice Nest. I was asked to give an indication of waiting times. So in the 24 to 25 year, over 80% of children and young people received their assessment within 28 days. So that is a kind of performance target that we're measured against. We're expected to get 80% of children and young people assessed within 28 days. We achieved that in most months of 2024 to 25. The current wait list as of last week is about 14 days. So we're pleased for that. It's, I think, a matter of public record that we were in special measures. We recently received the very pleasant news that we're no longer in special measures for that waiting list. So current waiting time for psychological therapies is, of course, longer. The target there is a 6 month target, and people are generally being seen within 4 to 6 months. Does vary on the specific therapy that's needed, because obviously people have to wait for the specific therapist to become available. That's not to say that nothing has happened while people are waiting for specific therapies. People receive nursing care, CBT informed approaches, and quite often there's been advice from psychologists to pursue their care while they're waiting for a specific therapy. And also, I guess it goes without saying, but it's important to note that children and young people with the highest risks or needs receive their support sooner. So we do, have a sort of red, amber, green system, and if people need to be seen, they're seen very, very fast. So, for instance, the crisis team will generally see people within 4 hours. That's their standard target. There we are. So in terms of complex care then, this is a fairly new development for us. We have invested in 2 specific complex care specialist nurses. We developed those posts as a new initiative to try and look after our young people who are care experienced better. So in particular, there was concern for young people who are our own Swansea Bay, young people who are out of area, and we were feeling that we were losing touch with them and their healthcare. So these post holders keep a particular eye on those young people wherever they're placed. You know, one of the sort of nice stories I was told is that a young man who'd been moving around a bit and hadn't been able to get his ADHD medication sorted out, we were able to, you know, the medic and one of the nurses was able to get out and, you know, take a drive and sort that out so that we could get medication prescribed for them. And there's lots of other potential there. Those posts are very much in their infancy, and the post holders are working hard to form liaison and to work through, you know, best way of making use of that resource. But hopefully we begin to see improvements as this year goes along. Hillside, I thought I would mention, is a very special project that we've been commissioned to do. For young people who are in this secure care home, and we've got a whole in-reach provision just about to start. Our post holders are just coming on board at the moment, and exciting project to be able to give special care to those young people who have very high support needs. I was asked to speak a bit about transition to adult mental health services. I apologise that this slide is not Welsh translated. It was difficult to come up with something for this. I've been conscious that, yeah, that concerns from outside of CAMS have reached me, but I haven't been able to button down on what the specific worries have been. Certainly transition between child services and adult services, there is an established pathway. So about 6 months before the young person turns 18, if they're benefiting from part 2 of the mental health measure, so if they have higher support needs, then some meetings start to happen with adult services to determine the appropriate pathway into adult mental health care if that's what's required. And there are certainly good links there, good links with my counterpart in adult. And young people certainly do transition to adult services where that's appropriate. It's fair to say that young people very often choose to take a break from mental health care at that point. A young person who I spoke to quite recently said, you know, I'm planning to go to uni. I'm not sure that I need to carry on further. She's, you know, she's coming up to 18 now, and she's, you know, looking towards discharge rather than transferring into adult services. And that does happen quite a bit for our young people. They make those decisions themselves at that age, and you know, as they should be able to. In the part 1 part of the service, that's rather different. So in the part 1 part of the service, we work with people, you know, we take a referral from somebody who's a day before their 18th birthday, and we will pick up that treatment and work with them until that treatment is concluded, even if they're past 18, because it's a brief period of treatment. So those young people, we very rarely transfer into adult services because they wouldn't need to transition into adult services. Thresholds for CAMS are lower than adult services, so our low moderate patients probably don't meet threshold for adult services, but we make sure that we help them before they, you know, just after they turn 18 if they're referred in ahead of time. Okay, other areas of development, last slide. We've been working with education partners towards the compliance with the new additional learning needs legislation, and helping with person-centred plans to, you know, reduce barriers to education and to help young people who need help to maximise their potential in education. We spent a lot of last year and are continuing to extend our offer of support and psychoeducation to parents. We found this key to helping children. It's very difficult to help children in a vacuum. Children need their parents or their carers or their loved ones to support them to improve and maintain mental health. Big ask of a child to do that on their own. So we have quite an extensive offer of carer support groups, psychoeducation groups. We've got a brand new group for parents who are struggling to understand young people's behaviour, which has been very warmly received. All of those groups are open to whoever's looking after young person. That includes care home staff we've had on these groups as well. So there we are, quick rundown, I guess, of CAMS and kind of what we've been up to over the last 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you. That was an impressive run through, I have to say that. But we've obviously got an expert here, Councillor Mary Jones, so I'm going to ask you, Mary, if you want to comment first of all or have any questions.
I think expert is rather not quite the right title, but yes, an interested person. I have to say something first. I have had a family member who isn't now receiving CAMS, but has been in the past in receipt of help from CAMS. So I've obviously got inside knowledge as well, which it could be. I don't know which way to take that. I want to ask a question first of all. When we first did the scrutiny, the question was asked, what was CAMS? Because nobody seemed to know what it was. And what we found was people were being referred to, say, CAMS, and they didn't actually need the in-depth support from CAMS, but they had nowhere else to go. Now, looking at the model, I'm assuming now that because you've got the front door or the single point of contact, that you actually do screen any young person that's referred to you, and then hopefully you signpost them to the most appropriate people that can help them. So I'm hoping that that's still like a positive from what we did in the initial CAMS. The positive mood for me is secondary schools can refer, because who better to know a child of school age than their teaching staff, because they work with them most times. I know I can see primary schools are not there yet. Is that something that will be in the future? If schools obviously want to do it, and you can take that, from them. You said about only ADHD young people, you could assess or check their medication. I thought it was all children that would having some medication that you could monitor that through CAMS, not just ADHD. And I think it was on your, I don't think it was the future possibilities. I looked at something else. Oh yes, the transition from CAMS to adult services. You have got a graph about how long children wait, but how long is the wait between CAMS and adult mental health services? Because that was one of the areas that we did find that there was quite a long wait, and obviously that's not a very positive move. So I'm hoping that you can clarify all those points, and thank you very much.
My goodness, where to begin? I'm not sure that my brain has remembered them all. You might remind me. So in terms of single point of access, triaging then, we do triage. So there's a phone call basically to every family who's referred. And during that phone call, we kind of establish, what the needs are. And then we talk through signposting and what the signposting choices are if it's apparent that CAMS is not the right thing. That's always followed up by a letter that goes to the GP and the family. So the family can have, any websites that we've recommended or any organisations that we've referred to. If the organisation will accept direct referrals from us, some organisations will, some won't, then we will also at that point put in a direct referral. So a great new example is we have the great new newly recommissioned school counselling service. CAMS can make direct referrals in Swansea to the school counselling service, which is very helpful for them because they get the information from CAMS, and helpful for the parent and the child because they don't have to go hopping about looking for referral pathways. So yeah, I think that's something that's definitely improved over time. I hope so. Parents seem much more satisfied. We get fewer parents who are kind of being referred and then re-referred and then re-referred. It seems to be helping people understand the decisions that are being made. So in terms of medication monitoring, yeah, if we prescribe medication, then we do monitor all types of medication. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. My point was that for ADHD, we don't diagnose ADHD. We only prescribe if there's already a diagnosis. But for other mental health conditions, yeah, we do diagnose and prescribe and monitor. Yeah. So particularly I mean, the exception is if a GP kind of makes a prescribing decision, we usually say it's good practice in medicine for the person who has prescribed to maintain that prescription and monitor. So if a GP starts a prescription, they usually carry on prescribing, but otherwise if CAMHS doctors prescribe, then they will kind of monitor, review, and quite often there's a shared care agreement with GPs. In terms of primary school age children and referrals and support, one of the reasons why we went for secondary school referrals rather than primary school referrals is because school in reach is very well established in primary schools, and primary schools can ask for screening, which our qualified nurses will do in primary schools. It's fair to say that whilst CAMHS do accept some children of primary school age, that's quite unusual, because if you think about it, doing direct work with very young children is not generally a very effective way to go in terms of the evidence base. It can be useful sometimes, but mostly it's about working with the parents and the young person's environment. And that quite often is better done by school professionals and other professions. So in deciding not to, at this time, accept or bring primary schools on board, it wasn't so much about rejecting primary schools, it was more about not wanting to use primary schools' time and have them disappointed by CAMHS outcomes. It felt to us better to encourage primary schools to make use of school in reach. We did have a conversation with representatives from primary schools about that, and they were part of that decision-making process not to bring primary schools on board. Having said that, never say never. It may well be in the coming year that we go back out to primary schools and have another look. I'm certainly not against that. I think when we started the pilot going out to primary schools last year, and I did feel a sense of trepidation because I didn't want to kind of open the floodgates suddenly and overwhelm services on either side. But that hasn't happened. It's been a very measured process on both sides, and I wouldn't hesitate in terms of demand about having primary schools on board, more in terms of usefulness for them, and not wanting to kind of disappoint people. And I'm very sorry, I didn't write down your other questions.
The last one, thank you for what you've said. I was thinking of the older primary school children, actually, and the junior part of it. So year 6, 5, 6, that kind of thing. The last one was about the transition from CAMHS to adult mental health, about the waiting times and, the expectations of the young people, really.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of beginning the transition, we certainly try to begin the transition 6 months before 18th birthday, which hopefully gives some time. But adult waiting lists are different from children's waiting lists. Erin, I don't know if you're aware of what the waiting list for adult services looks like currently. It will depend on the treatment required. This is the thing, so it's very difficult to be definitive because it depends what the person's needs are.
Psychological therapies is currently. Psychological therapies is currently at 88 weeks. So a long wait for someone entering a service, and outpatient care depends on the area, but for consultant review. But in terms of transition into secondary care, that's in the moment, that's worked up and transitioned over that period of 6 months as the child becomes an adult age. So there's no gap in service.
Sorry, did you say 88 weeks? I wasn't quite certain at home.
Yeah, 88.
But the young people are supported in that time?
Yeah, that waiting list time is specific to psychological therapies in primary care services. That's a therapy waiting list. The young person wouldn't wait to transition into secondary care coordinated services. That would just happen. Smooth transition over that 6 months, 17, 9 months to 18, 3 months. That should be a smooth transition. There's no wait for that at all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mary. Mark, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think this question may have just been answered, but when a youngster is approaching their 18th birthday, and he or she is yet to decide whether to transition to adult treatment or whether to end all treatment, would the parents of that youngster or parent have any influence over the final decision, or is it purely the choice of the youngster concerned? Thank you.
Great question. One of the conundrums of working with children and young people, it's fair to say. So in general terms, we try to involve families as much as we possibly can. It's the right thing therapeutically. All the evidence base says that we should, and we do. Inevitably, though, young people begin to develop, competence and ability to make their own decisions. So once people turn 16, we rely on capacity legislation. Most young people in services would have capacity to make treatment decisions. It's unusual that they wouldn't. Some examples might be people with severe eating disorder or people with psychotic illness who probably wouldn't have, or may at times not have capacity. But for the vast majority, people would have capacity to make their own decisions. So with that in mind, young people then kind of do make decisions on their own. That's not to say that we wouldn't listen to views of parents. We may well have our own views and, talk those through with the young people as to why we think, they would be better continuing. I have to say it's fairly rarely been an issue. Occasionally, I think, occasionally parents feel that being open to mental health acts as a safety net, and they worry about the young person not having access to mental health services. That's sometimes an issue. But most of the time we reach amicable agreements. I never say never because, the cases we remember are the cases we remember the hard times. But most young people and their families, come to reasonable decisions. I think it's helpful that these days there's quite a long transition pathway, particularly for people who've experienced a greater degree of mental health difficulty. And that 6 months gives a lot of thinking time for both professionals and the families involved.
Smashing, thank you very much. It's nice to know there's a safety net in place when required. Thank you very much.
Okay, I've also got another hand up, and that's Beth. Would you like to come in, Beth, please?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I just had a couple of questions. So I was wondering about the links with neurodiversity and CAMS, because you said that they sit separately when doing the assessments, but obviously there's quite a lot of links there with children with neurodiversity developing mental health. So I just wondered what that looks like day to day, whether there's kind of a lot of multi-agency working across the two sides. And the other one was whether or not you're going to expand CAMS InReach into FE colleges.
The FE colleges is probably an easier question to answer, although not particularly a great answer. So we don't, unfortunately, receive funding to offer School InReach to FE colleges, which means we're not able to offer that. Having said that, we do have links with the colleges. I have set up for colleges to be able to refer in direct to CAMS if they would like to. I do attend meetings with the FE colleges to talk through cases that are of concern. So there's certainly some links there, but we can't offer School InReach unless anybody knows of a source of funding we can apply to, in which case catch up with me and we'll do it. In terms of, I'm so sorry, I've forgotten your last question. Tell me again.
It was just about the link between neurodiversity services and mental health.
Yeah, great question. I think there's a lot of work to be done in this area. So in this part of the country, there's a separation between, where to begin? So the neurodevelopmental pathway is held in kind of two places that are outside of CAMS. Firstly, in education, who initiate that pathway, and then in the neurodevelopmental team, which sits in the health board, but in paediatrics. CAMS, of course, works with young people with neurodevelopmental needs because there's quite a crossover. So if you have a neurodevelopmental concern, you're more likely across your life course to have some difficulties with mental health, and particularly anxiety is super common. Emotional regulation is also super common. it's not without its difficulties. I think those difficulties are acknowledged on all sides. And I think over the next year, we are very much hoping to work closer with colleagues to try and come up with solutions that meet the needs of young people and families. I think nationally, the picture is quite difficult in the neurodevelopmental arena. There are lots, Swansea Bay is not alone in facing these difficulties. The demand in particular for diagnostic services is very much outstripping supply. I understand that some new funding was added in to help with diagnosis. So we've been able to, the paediatric colleagues have been able to arrange for diagnosis for more people this year, which is great for families. But yes, it is a concern. The modern approach is very much towards looking at individual needs rather than relying on having a diagnosis or not having a diagnosis. So whilst for many families it is a wait to get a diagnosis and quite a process, everybody is very committed to understanding what that young person's needs are and meeting those needs. So just because you don't have a diagnosis doesn't mean you can't have some education and resource on meeting, say, sensory needs, or you can have a resource on meeting needs around anxiety, or a resource on meeting needs around, helping your family to help you manage change. So I think that whilst diagnostically things are tricky, in terms of help for young people, it is there. I think for parents, though, parents understandably straightforwardly would like a rapid diagnosis. And as a society as a whole, and it's not just in Wales, this is in England and I think pretty much across the world, it is challenging for services because there's not unlimited funding and resource and skilled people to be able to achieve that. But certainly what I find from colleagues, I'm fairly new in post, came into post in the autumn of last year. What I find from colleagues is there's tremendous commitment to try and do the right thing by the young person in front of us. So that's the reassurance I give on that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no other hands or any. Oops, sorry, Sandra.
Sorry. Okay. I just want to go back to the transition model, if I'm honest. Is this a new model that is coming in? Because I'm going to be really upfront here, this is not my experience, having worked with a number of young people over the last few years. What I've found on a practical level is that many of them have gone into the abyss between CAMHS and adult mental health. I can name you two, which I obviously won't, but I could name you two who are still sat waiting in that abyss at the moment. And I just wonder whether it's a new model that you are now working on.
I'm not sure how long I have to be honest, I don't know how long the model has been in the way.
I'm not sure either. It's quite new, quite embedded. I'd be interested to have the name, see if we can unstick that, because that shouldn't be happening.
I think the other thing that I was going to ask as well is looking at the model, it does seem, and maybe it's unfair to ask you guys this, but it does seem that adult mental health have the choice when this child reaches the arbitrary age of 17 and a half, that they have the choice what they do with. You might have worked with that young person, you might have made a diagnosis, and they can choose one of three things to do with that person. And there's a sort of level of arbitration if you disagree, but at the end of the day, they get the say. And it does concern me that there's even the thought that they may not accept what you say to transition in.
Yes, thank you. Interesting point. I think that it's fair to say that adult thresholds are different from children's thresholds. So something that a person who may, we may say in CAMHS, is at the point of needing that help, adult services would say, no, doesn't meet threshold, or meets a different threshold, meets the threshold for something else. And it is, you know, I think a long-standing difficulty in that transition thing, you know, working in mental health for many decades now. I think this is been a long conversation. All I can say is my experience of trying to negotiate with adult colleagues is that I meet people who are reasonably receptive to challenge. Cam's colleagues are certainly willing and able to challenge. Sometimes it is about thinking, okay, if adult service is not the right thing, what is the right thing? Sometimes there are adult options out there that CAMs are not aware of, and you know, our adult colleagues are quite right about what the right option is. I think more and more there is an acceptance that a young adult is not quite the same as an adult who is more mature. So adult colleagues do try and take on board that picking up an 18-year-old is rather different from picking up a 40-year-old in all sorts of ways. So I think they're doing their best. We all have to recognise, though, that we work in a position of finite resource, and whilst resource doesn't make decisions for us, or at least we try not to, we have to be realistic about the kind of resource that is available, and we have to measure the kind of effectiveness of that resource. You know, sometimes, you know, it used to be that we worked for a long time with people in the hope that we could improve things, but when evidence was looked at a decade or so ago, it was found that actually more brief work, quite often with people coming in and out of services, is better for the person than trying to extend mental health work for people, that people build better resilience outside of services. So I guess in that way it can be helpful, you know, it can be helpful to sort of think maybe a treatment break is okay for people. But on an individual level, I'm certainly really interested in hearing about individual experiences, and if we can help, we can. I personally, you know, I'm very happy to pick up the phone and talk through situations with people and do what we can to resolve for individuals. If we don't know about it, we can't fix it. So let us know, and we'll do what we can to fix it 100%, you know.
I think it also is relevant, this 88-week wait. You can't possibly, I presume, as CAMs, work with somebody for that length of time whilst they're waiting for the next stage. And I just wonder how that is reconciled.
Just to be clear, I think that's thrown the room a little bit. That is specific for psychological therapy. So not every young person transitioning to adult needs that, and not every person in mental health services needs that therapy. So it's very specific to a therapy. Just to be clear, that's not for a mental health service. I just want to reiterate that. And so I'm going to just come back to you around your first point, just around we need to look at an escalation process. So if we do have concerns and you don't think we're getting it right between adult and children's service, we need to have a process where you can raise those concerns. Aside from Dee's very accessible, but I think we need to look at what our policy says about a formal escalation. So I've taken that down. I'll look at that.
Okay. I think perhaps you might need to take this up outside the meeting afterwards, and that's fine. But on that basis, I'm going to take a chance and say I can't see any more hands up anywhere. So I will bring this session in that sense of CAMS to a close. But I will say very much a thank you to Delia and Erin for the work that you've done in presenting it to us. Delia, I think not the most easiest of jobs you've had today, but thank you very much for the presentation. Okay. You're very welcome. I'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a virtual school and how a virtual school works. I got to say, I was quite intrigued with this. I was thought at the time myself, it might be a situation where children were coming online on Teams, but obviously I was very wrong in thinking that, having read the report. So I'm ready to be instructed, perhaps, in what I should know about it. You're going to start us off, Robert.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the invitation. Just to say a few words at the start to thank Helen for the work and the team for the work that's gone into preparing this report. I think it does outline the situation where we are now, and also looks forward to issues that are likely to change. So I think if we take Helen's report and then perhaps have a discussion afterwards, Chair, we'll be able to proceed that way.
Robert, Helen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to start by going through the report around the background as to how this came about, current position in terms of Welsh Government approach, and future look for the education team. So just as you said earlier, Chair, the word virtual can be quite confusing. Sometimes it can conjure up that idea that children will be working remotely, but it's not the case in this respect. The school is virtual in that it does not exist as a physical institution. Children don't attend it, and they continue to attend their own education settings, and they remain the responsibility of the school in which they are enrolled. So all local authorities in England and some in Scotland have adopted this virtual school model to support their children who are looked after, hereby known as CLA, if that's okay. They do have a large staff base and a virtual school head teacher. So that virtual school head teacher role is around raising attainment, ensuring progression of all looked after children from that particular authority, and working strategically across the authority with schools to monitor and support the achievement in education of looked after children. So in Wales, the virtual school role is very similar to Becky's role, which is the Education Clerk Coordinator. And she does very much the same thing. So Welsh Government have been looking into a Welsh virtual school model since around 2019. And in 2019, they commissioned Sir Alistair MacDonald to make recommendations as to whether this virtual school model would be feasible in Wales. And in 1.3 there, I've just put the link to Sir Alistair MacDonald's report for you to look at for yourselves. So his report concluded with 5 recommendations. He absolutely thought that the development of a Welsh virtual school model should be feasible and should happen. He said that the level of resourcing required should enable an integrated approach that improves outcome. With the importance of high quality data, the implications for training, and that need to broaden measure of what constitutes educational outcomes for LAC. So rethinking what our key performance indicators should be. So following this report, Welsh Government contracted another independent company, IFF Consulting, to look at how this virtual school model should actually be implemented in Wales. And this was published in 2021, and it actually outlined several principles which we're trying to achieve anyway in terms of learner voice, capturing holistic data, good quality personal education plans or PEPs, supporting schools to be more aware, and evidence-based practice and tailored interventions. So in point 1.5, I've put a link to that particular report, but the study actually concluded that based on the evidence, it would be premature to endorse a national rollout. So they weren't endorsing that rollout at that point in 2021. They noted several things. That was resistant to policy transferring it from England, and there were doubts about the evidence base, and there were fundamental concerns around funding, resources, and the effect on existing roles. So the study also recommended that if it wasn't imposed as a top-down approach by Welsh Government, it would probably fail because there was not buy-in from all local authorities. It was really, really clear that a lot of local authorities preferred their own model and did not want this virtual school model. So it's fair to say that the main difference between virtual schools in England and the education for CLA teams in Wales is the distribution of grant. So if I take you back to 2028, the terms and conditions for that LAC, or LAC PDG as it was called then, but CLA PDG as it's now called, changed from centrally based, where local authorities kept that money to retain for the use within centrally, to a school improvement model. So all monies now are distributed among schools. The terms and conditions actually say that local authorities can maintain some, and that's the definition, some. So whereas in England, the pupil premium grant is centrally held and distributed to schools as deemed appropriate by the virtual school head. So Welsh Government response to that particular findings was to make a small one-off funding available to each local authority to develop their own pilot virtual school model. A further report has now been commissioned to assess the value of each pilot model from each of the local authorities which bought into that. And important to say that not all local authorities applied to that grant. So we're currently awaiting the final report and any further updates from Welsh Government regarding whether we are adopting a fully funded virtual school model, which is consistent across all local authorities in Wales. So the current position then, all local authorities in Wales now are in a different position. There's no consistency because not all local authorities, as I said, bid for the funding. In Swansea, we made a bid because we knew it was going to be one-off to develop a digital solution which was built on a single database and a lot of other technical terms which I'm not quite sure of. But what we wanted was this unique, structured and holistic approach. And the aim then from point 2.2 was what we hoped, if I can draw your attention to that, would be the proposed benefit for our IT solution. But following a number of unforeseen delays and some barriers, of course, we had COVID in the meantime, then we had an inspection, so there were quite a few different delays. A lot of the time was spent on the ALN model, so it was quite difficult. Not all features were realised. However, the ePEP, the electronic PEP, was developed and some reporting functions did become available. So this provided us with an opportunity to record in line with the curriculum of Wales and for pupil voice. So for a variety of reasons, as an Education Directorate, we have not renewed the contract for CACI. However, have undertaken a full IT transformation strategy. We have learned our lessons from experiences with this external provider, and we are now supporting a virtual school module in the new IT system, which is called Teacher Centre, and will be implemented fully by 2026. We're hoping to put a trial period in place before that. And if I may, could I digress slightly and talk a little bit more about what we were talking about right at the beginning and your question at the beginning, please, Chair, if that's okay right now. So just to make everyone aware, in recent years, Welsh Government have withdrawn key data performance indicators, especially those at the end of Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3, because they do not align with the principles of the curriculum for Wales. In addition to this, there was a decision by Welsh Government to exempt LAC data from the school census, which is our PLASC returns in 2029. So that meant that local authority comparisons can no longer be made. So previous to 2029, because of the PLAS data, we used to be able to compare with local authorities. So our local LAC analysis now simply comprises of data we maintain ourselves and through Child and Family. So in Teacher Centre, we were just talking earlier on, we are able to provide some itemised data, and we'll be able to do this far more readily and easily and in a more timely fashion. Our key performance indicators at the moment are around Key Stage 4 data, and that would be the CAP9 approach, attendance, which is critical for looked after children, our destination data, because our best hopes are always to produce lifelong learners, and our NEET outcomes at post-16. We recognise, and it is recognised nationally, that the unique experiences of our looked after learners make data attainment data comparisons really unhelpful, as these outcomes don't always reflect the positive educational experiences for each learner. They come to education maybe at different times, but we always want to make sure that we are doing our best for our children. So we want to support learner voice to help with the creation of additional KPIs or key performance indicators. So I'm hoping that might have answered some of your questions, but we can come back to that later if that's okay. So if I go back to point 2.5 now after that quick distraction, sorry. So the current education team for looked after children comprises of the statutory coordinator role, data officer, and a 0.5 full-time equivalent personal education plan coordinator. It is a smaller team compared with other local authorities. However, we do work relentlessly, and we try and achieve all outcomes through active collaboration with schools, other council services and various outside agencies. Our preference, of course, when providing support to CLAR in education is to utilise that trauma-informed approach. It seeks to ensure, we want to seek to ensure there are always emotionally available adults. So what we are trying to do is advocate for a number of trauma-informed learning support and CLAR champions within the wider education team. So we've got support from additional learning needs, our education inclusion and our education welfare service to promote that attendance and engagement in education of all our Swansea looked after learners. We are currently recruiting early intervention officers to Becky's team. And one will have that specific focus on working with our children who are looked after. So while IT systems are never ever going to replace people, and we acknowledge that, a good IT system can enhance the service we provide to the children that we looked after. We're really waiting with some anticipation around Welsh Government reviewing the terms and conditions of our CLAR PDG, and you know, our best hopes that we can utilise that centrally. But obviously, whatever they decide, we're happy with it. So just on 2.6 there, this just gives a full example or some examples of what the team are trying to achieve. We're really trying to promote that early intervention strategy. We're trying really hard to undertake learner voices, learner voice exercises, and we're working really, really closely with our participation officer and cross-directorate working. We're looking to provide bespoke educational opportunities to really engage our learner and look for a route to work opportunities. We're supporting increased attendance in school. We're working in liaison with the ACES Hub Wales to try and trauma-informed approaches. We're working in close collaboration with our additional learning needs, as I said earlier, to support that timely response when needed for our children who are looked after and have ALN. Again, attendance is really important, and we're championing the educational needs of CLAR and encouraging that lifelong learning through the issuing of the higher education bursary for care leavers. And I do believe we're one of the only local authorities to do so. So in terms of forward look, and I know Becky will be chomping at the bit to tell you a little bit more about what she is doing and what she wants to do. We are looking at a number of items. So obviously, if you've got any questions on 3.1, Becky would be the person to answer that today. But I think I could just summarise by saying the Education Looked After Children team or CLAR team have a really strong leadership in Becky and a really excellent understanding of the local need. Excuse me, and very well placed to respond to outcomes of Welsh Government decisions around whatever they decide in terms of the virtual school model. Thank you.
That's educated me. I've also got to be educated now as to how I switch the mic on, but that's another story. I'm not seeing any hands up at the moment, and I'm not seeing anything anywhere in that sense. Oh, sorry, Lyndon.
Great, thank you, Chair, and thanks, Helen, as always, for a very thorough report. You know, really excellent. Couple of things you mentioned during your presentation about attendance, and that is obviously key, because unless we get people actually attending or taking part, then obviously it isn't going to work. And obviously, that, as you said, learner engagement. Do we speak to other councils in Wales to find out, you know, if we can learn anything from them, or they could learn from us in many ways? But do we pass that information through? Are we having that? And in the same way, we talked about now a different model in England and Scotland. do we compare those outcomes? You're not always the same because you can't compare apples and pears. I know that totally, but maybe because obviously 3 different systems, and it would be useful to find out what those outcomes, what the outcomes are in each of those countries, and maybe you could get back to us on that because I don't expect you to have that in your back pocket. But thanks very much.
Okay, come in, Chair. Thank you. Totally agree with your point about attendance. We cannot reduce the attainment gap unless we first reduce the attendance gap. 100% agree with everything you've said there. I'll ask Becky to come in about what's happening with attendance and what her vision around attendance looks like. Forgotten your middle question, but the last question in terms of outcomes, absolutely, I will. Oh yes, I know, other local authorities, yeah. So Becky does attend a national development group, delivery group in terms of looked after children throughout Wales. So lots of information is shared there and good practice shared as well. She's also been part of a PEP Task and Finish working group where our children in Swansea specifically have been asked to feed into that. So we've been really pleased that their voice has been heard and that good practice has been shared. But I suppose as well, Becky, you can obviously come in as well, but it's about you just picking up a phone and speaking to one of your colleagues around Wales as well. That happens. So both formal and informal discussions with other local authorities does take place. But I will definitely come back to you on outcomes from the 3 different countries.
Great. Thank you very much. I know that, for example, I asked a question about the counties because I know in Swansea we're really good at school sharing good practice, and that I know Robert wouldn't have it any other way, and that does happen, and you get that feedback. So it would be good if only they learn from us, but it would be useful. There's always a gem of an idea somewhere, so that's good news. Thank you very much.
Okay, to come in on that, just to kind of update you really on the attendance, as Helen said, if we don't have attendance in school, we don't have engagement, we have increased safeguarding risks and so on and so forth. In terms of the attainment gap, it gets wider and wider, and also the risk of becoming NEET increases. So attendance for me has been key and has been an area that I've kind of focused on since I came into post back in September. The Teacher Centre programme, IT solution, I'm hoping now is going to be the answer to all my prayers. So the current module that we've seen that's only sort of in development really will allow me to draw down that data around attendance for children who are looked after specifically. It will give me half-termly information and data, so I'll be able to track those young people whose attendance is falling below 90%, 50%, 100%. For me, it's about early intervention and prevention. So rather than colleagues within social services coming, to complex needs panel to say, we have a young person in crisis, they're not attending, they're on reduced timetable, their exclusions are increasing, I'm going to be able to use that IT solution to be able to track and monitor that attendance and engagement. I think what's been key as well is that sort of cross-directorate working where I will sit on complex needs panel, I will sit on placement stability panel, so we can reduce the number of school moves where absolutely possible, early identification of any additional learning needs that may have been identified or not, and overcome those barriers to accessing education and provisions that are available to our young people. I think as well, in addition to that, it's been for me this year a real focus to create those bespoke packages of education to increase that attendance and engagement. Sometimes without that engagement and that sort of, what are those barriers to you accessing your education provision? Is it that you have an interest that, maths and English isn't really for you, you're struggling, you're not coping, or is there an area we can explore through possibly Gower College? If they've got a keen interest in landscaping or hairdressing or motor mechanics, then I've been working with schools and with colleagues in social services to create those bespoke packages of education to ensure not only do we have an increase in attendance, but we're looking at what other qualifications can we explore for that young person. GCSEs are not for everybody, and if we can find another qualification that can lead on to that post-16 opportunity, where we have those lifelong learners, where we reduce our number of young people at risk of becoming NEET, then that's kind of my pledge really, is certainly an area of keen interest of mine, but also one that I will be championing for our children that are looked after.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think one thing that we didn't quite mention was around the close working partnership we have with our education welfare officers and the welfare service. So each school has an attendance action plan, and as part of that action plan this year specifically, Becky has made sure that LAC is complete, or CLAR is identified on that action plan. So every school will have to account for what is happening for that child at every time the EWO reviews the action plan, which will be termly. That then actually gets fed back to Becky, to the lead officer for attendance and safeguarding. So it's another area we're looking at to try and make sure that we're completely understanding what is going on for our looked after children.
Robert?
Thank you, Paxton. I just wondered if you think it's a disadvantage for the children of Wales that we're not all doing exactly the same, every authority.
I think one thing that was occurring to me as we were talking earlier around KPIs was the fact that actually we don't have national KPIs for our children. So it's very, very difficult for us to assess what's happening from one local authority to another. I mean, very much that attendance will be one of those that are really sort of pertinent, and key stage 4 data, but there is no way of sharing that information. So it does make it very, very difficult. So yeah, I think probably it is quite difficult to be able to do so, and hopefully when Becky, you do go to the National Delivery Group, maybe that's one thing that we could suggest. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not sure I should be asking questions, but I do have one, if that's okay. It's probably a bit in keeping with that issue about not having an all Wales model, but will our CLAR also pick up on children that are placed outside of Swansea? And does our CLAR have any responsibility for looked after children that are other authorities looked after children but are in Swansea? Because it feels like that adds a complexity that will be difficult to overcome, but perhaps you'd tell me that we've already thought that through and we've got a solution.
You're absolutely right. It does add layers upon layers. We've got a lot of children, obviously, as you know, go out to county for their education. So that does make it very difficult to track and support those children, absolutely. And we have a substantial number and growing number of children who are coming into the authority, of which we again do have information about and work with our other authorities in that respect. We try and make sure, as we said earlier, that all our local authorities are working well together, because it's mutually beneficial. So we do try our best. In terms of those children who are outside the authority, we're working hard to try and put a portal together to be able to gather that information. But as always, data is only as good as the person who's inputting it. So it is difficult, which is why we prefer a person-centred based. We just need more people, really, basically, in a nutshell. But we're hoping the IT system will help us.
I'm looking around very carefully and I just cannot see any hands, except my own at the moment. Very simple question, I guess, and perhaps it shows what I was going to say. You've got a virtual head teacher, one head teacher who runs his school, working on his own. presumably monitoring the performance of best part of 400 children. How on earth did you do that in the time? Is it enough, or are you looking to expand that sort of workforce in that sense?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think I might have alluded to the fact, but probably haven't written in my report, that in England, obviously all the money goes centrally. So the virtual school model can be fully function. So we've seen some local authorities in England, for example, with 13 members of staff looking after very similar numbers than we have. So I suppose what will come, we'll have to wait and see what Welsh Government propose in that respect. At the moment, we're working as a to the LAC model, to the LAC coordinator model, whereas the money's actually in Wales goes out to schools. So we can only do what we can do within that respect. But we're hoping that the PDG, the terms and conditions of the PDG, will be looked at. So if there is this desire to have a virtual school model in Wales, it can be fully funded properly.
It'll be interesting to see how that follows on. Robert, you wanted to come in at the end, yeah?
Yeah, if I can come in, Chair, at the end, and thank Helen and Becky for this afternoon's presentation, because I think what we've had from Helen to start off with is a fairly candid, or a very candid portrayal of an evolving situation. Things are changing. There are decisions that are being taken locally in light of experience. There's also decisions being taken at Welsh Government level that we'll have to respond to. And I think, Helen has taken us through that. Becky then took us through the mechanics of this, the nitty-gritties of this. And I think, Becky, your enthusiasm about the role was infectious. And it's clear what we want to achieve. And that the team is working to that. At the end of the day, this is about vulnerable children and young people and their life chances. And what I'd say to you, Sue, in terms of the KPIs, this is true about KPIs across the education system in Wales. Yes, we don't want to go back to the system where there were so many KPIs that schools were chasing indicators, and you asked yourself sometimes, well, what's the point of chasing this particular indicator except to prove a point? But there again, we need indicators. We need to be able to measure performance, and more importantly, we need to be able to make sure that our children, young people, are on the right trajectory. So it's getting that balance right, I would say, Sue.
Hi, Robert. I think you've probably said a number of things there that I probably would have said anyway in that sense, particularly in saying a big thank you both to Helen and Becky for the presentation this afternoon. It has been very interesting. Obviously, I've raised something at the start in terms of the letters, and that is still going to be a concern for us, I think, for some time going forward, to know how we are actually monitoring and seeing how successful our looked after children are doing and the progress they're making. And I think it's progress that's important as much as what they achieve at the end of the day. So on that basis, thank you very much. Much appreciated. You're very welcome now either to stay and enjoy the rest of the meeting, or if you would prefer to go, you're very welcome to do that as well. I think the choice is probably for you to go, isn't it? Okay, thank you very much. And that basically moves us now back on the agenda to item 9, and that's the update on services for young people aged 16 plus, including youth justice. So I'm not quite sure. Is it Julie going to take us through this, or Amy?
It's me.
Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you.
The floor.
Thank you. And thank you very much for the opportunity to come and talk about our 16 plus services in child and family. It's quite a large area of the work that we do across the whole service. But for the purposes of today and the report that I'm hoping people have had the opportunity to see, I'm focusing on the services that sit within my area. So the 16 plus team, the Youth Justice Service, and specifically in terms of child disabilities, I've touched on transition. So I'll talk you through sort of the key points from each service, and I guess the key pieces of work that we do to support our 16 plus young people. And I guess it's important to say that that age group, it can be quite challenging for young people to navigate their late teens, and particularly the transition into early adulthood. And I think we've sort of touched on that in earlier presentations this afternoon. But what is very important to us as a service is that we do our very best to get that right for young people, and that we respect their choices as far as that is safe to do so. So we are navigating or supporting young people to navigate quite a tricky transition of their own, and helping them to make and take safe risks, but ensuring that we are there to provide a safety net, I guess, where that is needed. So in terms of our Bays Plus service, that is our 16 plus service within Child and Family. That is an ever expanding service, and it is made up of our social work team, so the team that will work with 16 and 17-year-olds, those who are open to the service because they are young people in need of additional support, potentially care and support. So they could be young people who are within the child protection arena, and they are also our looked after children. So in terms of the data that is provided in the report, you can see that the majority of young people that are open to the service are young people who are looked after. Within that team, we also have our leaving care service, so that every 16 and 17-year-old that is open to the team who is looked after will be allocated a young person's advisor, so a YPA. And the purpose of that is that that individual, that worker, can get to know them before they turn 18, and is then able to support them, hopefully smoothly, through that transition and into their adulthood as care leavers. In terms of, I guess what is also important to say in terms of our YPAs is we have a specialist YPA who supports our unaccompanied asylum seeking children, and that service also sits within our Bays Plus, with our Bays service, where we are then able to support those particular individuals in terms of their specific needs and the particular specialism, I guess, in terms of supporting those young people who come to reside in the Swansea area. The service also has the Youth Homeless Prevention Service. So this is fairly new. This came into Bays in July of last year. I'm saying it's new, it's very nearly 12 months now, but in July last year. This has been a new area of development for the service. When we work with 16, 17-year-olds, we know that accommodation is often a very key factor in their lives, and some young people unfortunately aren't in a position where they have that stability in terms of accommodation. So by moving this service into Bays, we've been able, and we're hoping that we will continue to be able, to support young people to think about the best choices and help them to move, if they need to move into independent living, into a provision that meets their needs and best supports them. Within that service, I think the makeup of that service is that we have housing support officers who are specialists to support those young people, but we also have family mediation workers as well. So we're looking very much at the preventative element. We certainly don't want to see young people becoming homeless. We're working with them to prevent that happening, to support them to remain within families if it's safe to do so. So we have specialist workers who are able to provide that level of support. There are connections with housing options, because we recognise that once children and young people are reaching 18 or are close to 18, they would need some additional support from housing options in terms of adult accommodation support. Young people who are looked after and maybe living within foster care or with family members as kinship carers, we also work with them to support where we're able to do so, for them to remain within that provision post 18, and that's under the When I'm Ready scheme. So we're very lucky to have a number of foster carers and family members who are wanting to support the young people living with them post 18. And And we are able, therefore, within this service to look at, is that the right option, and how do we support that, and how can we provide some financial support to enable that to happen. So Bays Plus is based in Information, so on the Kingsway in town. And what we're very lucky to have in that building are a number of other services that can support our 16 plus. So we have our NEET team based in there, so we're not in education and employment and training team. They often work with the same young people that are open to the Bays service. So it's an opportunity really for young people to be able to go to one place in order to access that support and provision as well. The Information also has a sexual health clinic that runs from there, again, enabling young people to go to one place in order to have that level of support. And we also have Barod Choices services based there as well. So where young people may have some challenges in terms of substance misuse, or may be looking for some level of education around substance misuse, then they are able to access that service as well. In the report, you will see that we have included, and in fact, right the way through the report, we've included what our young people are actually saying to us about the service. I won't go into that in detail now, but just to sort of raise that this is really an important area and a continuing developing area that we are, we're always keen to work with our young people. Their voices, positive or otherwise, really helps us to develop the service. And as you will see from some of the feedback that's provided here, there are very positive relationships that are built with the staff that work with them. And there are equally young people who are very, very able and willing to tell us where they feel that changes should be happening. And that enables us to think about how we're doing as a service and what we need to be doing to make appropriate changes. So in terms of transitions, this is a really important area of work for this age group. And there are a number of reasons, I guess, why young people are transitioning into adult services. So within child and family, that would usually be our children and young people who have a physical or learning disability, where we know, possibly from a very early age, that support is going to be needed throughout their adolescence and into adult life. But also, and I know we've touched on this already in discussions, in respect of where young people may be neurodiverse and there are some additional vulnerabilities and needs that may come with that, we also need to seek to ensure that they have support into adult life to be able to manage that safely. Quite often it is those young people who will sit within our Bays Plus service, and where we will need to have those discussions at as early a stage as possible with adult service colleagues to make sure that that support is in place. So we have a transition panel, and that is across child and family and adult services. So that I chair that, but it is attended by principal officers from adult services also. And we are utilising that panel to talk about any child who we know is going to require that transition. So within our child disability team, we seek to start that transition process age 14, 15. And the purpose of that is to ensure that we are supporting families to think about and to understand what it is that might be needed into adult life and how they can best be supported. Within Bays, obviously, it's the 16 plus team, so we are working with that age range. But we are taking those young people into this panel at the earliest possible opportunity. So even before adult services are able to take them on board, they are working with us and in partnership with us in order that we can make that transition, hopefully, as smooth as it possibly can be. We are under no illusion that there is work to be done in this area. This is not exactly where we want it to be at this moment in time. But what I will say is, given the relationships that we have with our adult services colleagues, we are definitely in a really good position to move that forward positively. One of the other things to talk about, just to mention in terms of transition, is capacity. And obviously we have to be mindful of that for some of the young people as to whether they have capacity to make choices that are appropriate and right for them. So again, primarily within our Child Disability team and our BAYS Plus team, we work within the Mental Capacity Act and undertake the mental capacity assessments where it is appropriate to do so, where we might have some concerns as to whether there is capacity concerns for a young person. We aim to do that prior to any transition into adult services, again, so that transition can be as smooth as is possible. So moving us on to the Youth Justice Service, which is a particular service that sits within my area, but also I appreciate a service that I was asked to talk about in this context. So Swansea Youth Justice Service is a multi-agency service, and it works out of two premises, one in the town centre and one in Forest Fach, which is our Youth Justice Centre, which is where generally we try to run most of the activities with young people from that building. This team works with children aged 10 to 17, sometimes into adulthood, depending on the reason that they're open to the service. I think probably what is important to say about the Youth Justice Service is the landscape is often changes and is certainly has changed over the past few years. So what we see now is less children and young people within the court arena and being made subject to statutory court orders, and more young people who are open to the service through the prevention route or the early intervention route, so the out of court disposal route. That's a really positive position for us to be in, because obviously we do not want to be criminalising children and young people, and we want to be able to work with them within the community as far as is possible. So seeing this change is definitely something that we welcome. So generally about 80% of the work that comes into the service sits within the prevention and early intervention area, with some young people who naturally are going to end up in the statutory under statutory court orders, and very, very few of those that might end up receiving custodial sentences. So I wanted to focus really in terms of the prevention and early intervention work, given that is where the majority of the work sits. So every young person that comes into the service, no matter what level, the team undertake an assessment of them. So it's a proportionate assessment depending on the reason that they're coming through. And the aim of this is numerous. It's obviously to understand that young person, and it's to understand where the needs may be, and also to develop intervention plans and to really learn about the young person and think about, well, what is it that we could do that would best divert them and move them away from future involvement in offending behaviour. So we are very lucky in that we have a very skilled team, and we are able to offer quite a number of activities within the service, which is really positive. So without providing an exhaustive list, that could include things like woodwork, cookery. The team have developed in the Youth Justice Centre hair salon where young people can do things that are beyond me, practice doing hair, paint nails, all sorts of wonderful things. But we also have a music studio there, which is exceptionally popular, and we're very lucky to have a staff member who is extremely skilled in that area of work. We have very good connections with education. We have a tutor that attends the centre as well, just to support young people who may not be attending school full time, or may need some additional support in order to achieve exams, whatever that may be. And also we have staff who take young people out into the community. So they may go out on their bikes, do outdoor activities, go walking. There's lots and lots of opportunities. And I guess for us, we know that is absolutely essential to support young people to divert away from behaviours that we don't want them to be involved in. In 2024, the team ran a pilot of following the concerns around antisocial behaviour within Swansea. They ran a pilot in primary schools, because although we're working with were working with 10 to 17, we were seeing that actually we were having quite a number of the younger age group coming into the service. So the ask was, and the thinking around it was, if we can get into primary schools, years 5 and 6, and do some work with those children, help them understand antisocial behaviour and the risks associated with that, we could hopefully, seek to divert them away at an early age. That was a pilot. I think initially went into 6 primary schools to just kind of pilot that. It was really successful. We always had a view of, okay, we'll roll that out if needs be. It's actually been very successful, and we're having quite a number of requests from primary schools across Swansea now to take that up and to have that support. So the team are continuing to work, and we're continuing to roll that out. The team also work within secondary schools, and always have worked within secondary schools, offering a wide range of educative sessions that could include antisocial behaviour. It could also include looking at youth violence, concerns around weapons, anything that is relevant and helpful for children and young people broadly to have understanding of. And I guess what I didn't mention when I was talking about bays as well, and I think is really important, is our school, the work that we do within schools is across the board. So in terms of youth homelessness, the Bays Plus team are also going into schools, into secondary schools across Swansea, to support young people to think about what it means to become homeless, what that looks like, and how to prevent it, and where support can be accessed. So I think in terms of youth justice, I think what is also important and really helpful in terms of the way in which we work with young people is the fact that because it's a multi-agency service, we're able to help young people access the right specialist services that they may require. So, for example, we have a regional speech and language service that is based within youth justice. And that service is absolutely fantastic in order to help us understand our young people, how we should work with them, how we should provide plans that help them to understand what we're seeking to support them to try to achieve. That service will, the outcomes from assessments within that service are also shared with partner agencies where it's relevant around those young people, so that we're trying to build a bit of a consistent approach in working with young people who have speech and language needs. We also have a CAMS worker connected to youth justice, which again is invaluable for us because it enables us, or enables the staff, to have consultations, to talk through where they may have concerns about mental health or developing mental health with a young person that they are working with. And it is our connection into the CAMS service as well. We also have an emotional wellbeing worker who is, I suppose, sits in between the need for CAMS and for young people where there are some levels of anxiety or concern, which actually there's a lower level need. So we're very lucky that we've actually got that that support in place as well. And we work alongside other services within child and family, including our CMET service. So where we have children who are experiencing maybe exploitation, so that could be criminal exploitation, or maybe involved in contextual concerns, then we, as a service, work very, very closely together in order to address that and to support those young people in the way in which they require. And again, in the report, from a youth justice perspective, our young people, again, they have very, very clear voices in terms of what they want, what they expect, and how they want the service to develop. And again, there's some of that feedback which I won't read out, but it is contained within the report. So I suppose in terms of summing up and next steps, I spoke about at the very beginning, this is quite a significant area of work. You know, our adolescent age group is ever growing, it feels, and actually, you know, we need to make sure that we are supporting those young people in the right way. So we are in the process of looking at that, not just within my area, but right across child and family services. And we're developing a task and finish group to look at what does the support for this age group look like? Are we getting it right? I would argue in most cases we probably are, but there's always room for improvement. What does that look like, and what are our young people telling us would help? So this is brand new. We haven't even had the first session yet, but that is our intention, is to work on that and to see how we can continue to develop in this area. In terms of transitions, we are also working again in partnership with adult services to create a policy that is specifically around transitions and how we ensure that that is as smooth as it can be, moving from child and family to adults. So that is an additional piece of development work that we are undertaking. And finally, we are again in the process of looking at how we can create a child and young persons hub within the town centres, within the city centre. And that would hopefully incorporate all of the services that I've spoken to you about today, but also more services as well, where that's appropriate to do so, so that we are ensuring that we have one place for young people to go where they can get the support that they need. Within my teams, I've got 3 separate buildings currently being utilised. Ideally, we would hope that we could bring that together. So I hope that that's okay. And any questions?
Sorry, yes, indeed. Thank you, Helen. Comprehensive as usual. I'm going to throw it open. There's no hands on the screen that I can see. I'm looking over there and I can see one. So, Lyndon, the floor is yours.
If I may, having visited the panel, it's a bit rude really, but if I may, thank you for the work you're doing. That really sounds really excellent, actually, I have to say. I met somebody from a different part of Wales, in North Wales actually, at the weekend, and one thing they were worried about there was knife crime. And what he was doing is using knives, but getting young people to carve wood into things that they actually made money from. So really turning it round in that way, and that was excellent. But that, the work you're doing there, it was excellent. Can I say, do you give help to these young people 16 plus to get them into work, whatever that might look like? But obviously that's part of it, and how to change their lives, actually getting them into work, that would totally change it. So are you doing any work around that?
Thank you for asking that question, because it always prompts me to think about things that I haven't said. So yes, in a nutshell, yes, we work, and as I stated, we have the NEAT team based within Information in Town. So we have that connection, that very close connection in terms of how we can support young people who aren't accessing any training or employment, and how we move that forward. But I guess in terms of our youth justice world, what I probably didn't mention is we do have dedicated employment and training officer within youth justice, specifically working with those young people where there is a need to identify, I guess, what they're interested in, what they're keen for. And some of the experiences that they have within that service enables them to think about, okay, I've tried woodwork, actually that is something that I'm really, really interested in. So the team will work with them and do their very best to try and identify pathways to get them into college, to get them thinking about if there are apprenticeships anywhere, whether they could access those, how we can develop and support young people to move forward. So employment and training is always part of the plan for young people, and how we can support them to, I guess, achieve what they're interested in.
Do you speak to sort of would-be employers to actually look for, actually, if you like, holding their hands for that next step? Because that would be transformational for them.
Yeah, I would say that that's probably an area that we could develop and improve upon. There certainly have been cases. I can think of some young people where that has happened. Sometimes that can happen through reparation projects, so where young people are working within communities to repair harm in terms of offending behaviour. That can happen, relationships can naturally build, but I think it's a really important point, and it's definitely something that as a service we probably need to continue to look at and think about, and we'd always welcome any interest in that area.
Organisational company in Swansea, and they actually, what they do when people are starting work, and very often these first job, always very nervous, and so on, and what they do is not just help them to get that job, but actually hold their hands for the first 6 months as well, because it's quite a challenge, if if people are in that position. It's a big step. But yeah, great. But thank you for the work you're doing, and thanks for the reply.
Amy, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to just make a point on that, really, just to say that we have the lead team do a weekly drop-in at information where any young person who's not open to the service or open to the service can come in on their own or with a worker and get advice. Quite often it's to start with kind of confidence building. You know, they're not at the point where they're ready to work, but the lead team will work on the steps and to get them to that point. So it's available every week.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking again. Any hands? Louise. I have got one question, in fact, in that case. We were talking, I think, last month about accommodation being a problem. And you were looking at potentially just having 2 providers, and you were looking to increase the number of providers. How successful are we being in that process at the moment?
Yeah, thank you. So you're quite right. We've been looking at how we can expand the offers, I guess, and the opportunities for young people. And we have developed a framework now. So I think you are quite correct. We've been working with a small number of providers, 3 providers, for quite some time, but we've developed a framework now, and what is really positive is that we now have 16 providers that are signed up to that framework. So it's still early days and we're still sort of finding our way in terms of utilising that. But what is really positive is that it is seemingly providing us with more choice for young people, which is really, really important.
I think what probably is important at this time as well, in this stage when we're looking at the youth justice system, that the providers that we have provide facilities that will militate against the wrong behaviour taking place. And I'm not quite sure you control that.
Yeah, that's always a challenge, and particularly, you know, when we have young people who are residing together, you know, those things, it can be complicated. But what I would say is that any young person that enters into supported accommodation, which is what we term that area of work, the providers have a very, very clear picture of each individual young person's. We provide that, we assess them, we support the providers to understand them, and it is about how those providers can then continue to support those young people achieve their goals. So where we are working with them to try to move them away from offending, and it might not even be that, it could be, you know, accessing employment and training, it could be any number of things, it could even just be independent living skills, that we have that expectation that they are supported within their supported accommodation as much as they are by the services around them.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to come in and thank Helen and her teams, you know, for the report, but, you know, obviously the ongoing work they do is such an important area. And I think this area of work has got quite a lot of public and media scrutiny on it at the moment as well. So it'd be interesting to see how that develops in the light of some of that. And I really hope in a year's time, when we bring a similar report, we can give an update on our city centre hub, which is really exciting if we can get that off the ground. So thank you again.
I am, on that basis, just going to reiterate our thanks as well. Fascinating subject, as always. And the presentation, like all the others today, has been excellent. So it's been a really useful meeting, I think. I've only got one item left on the agenda. It's only going to take you 2 seconds. So if you'll bear with me, it is the work plan for the remainder of this year. We've just got the 1 meeting, and I think we're going to have performance monitoring and delivery of corporate priorities. So that's going to be interesting to see where we go with that. But on that basis, can I say thank you very much to everybody who's attending the meeting today. Thank you for your input, and particularly to the presenters, Helen in particular, because you did the last one at this point in time, and Amy as well. I mustn't forget you out there on the screen. Thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. even those who are interlopers as well. If they want to come, they're very welcome.
Thanks all. Bye, night.